the alternatives in Election 96, the first of the Election 96 debates and programs that GBC is offering you throughout this campaign. Tonight we have three guests, the leaders of the three political parties contesting this election, the GSLP, the GNP and the GSD. We'll be talking to Joe Bossano, Dr. Joseph Garcia and Peter Caruana respectively. The object of this program is for the audience to put the questions. So we have an invited selection of guests here, in fact a packed house at the John Macintosh Hall Theatre, and they will be offering themselves to ask questions to the candidates tonight. The way it works is that each candidate, to be fair, has an allocation of 22 minutes, and each question asked has a maximum of 2 minutes, so as not to prolong and have as many people as possible asking questions tonight to those three candidates. So before anything else, let's ask our first guest tonight, the leader of the Socialist Labour Party, Joe Bossano. Many thanks indeed. Many thanks, and we'll get on to the first question tonight. It's a gentleman with a black jacket sitting about 7 rows up from here.
Hello, good evening. Mr. Bossano, my name is Gilbert McCarthy, MOD convener. In connection with the 1993 review and the drastic reduction of MOD workforce, which the MOD has estimated at around 700 of a total staffing level of 1,306, for example, 53.6% cut in labor resources, which could have very negative consequences to our economy. Could you please let us know what is your position and proposal in finding viable alternative and support for those made compulsory redundant? Thank you.
The first thing I think we need to put in context is that the program of restructuring our economy has already given us the basic infrastructure to enable us to attract new investment to Gibraltar. We've got a number of projects which are already in place and a number which may or may not materialize. When we're looking at potential businesses, they may be successful or otherwise. We hope that the Touch Rosari will actually identify, specifically target investment opportunities for ex-MOD workers using ex-MOD facilities. That should be with us within a month, and on the basis of that, the approach of the GSLP will be to go to the representatives of the workforce so that we can put forward to the United Kingdom a joint study with specific areas that will generate in excess of the numbers of jobs that we're going to lose over the same time scale, so that if we find that there is an element of non-viability in some of them, we will have enough excess numbers to be sure that we come well within the numbers that you're talking about. There's always a problem of matching skills and age, and therefore by looking specifically at the composition of the workforce and the nature of the assets, we stand a better chance of being able to produce jobs that are suitable for the people that are becoming redundant.
We have to go on to our next question. And our next question comes from that gentleman over there.
Good evening, Mr. Bossano. The GSD representative, Mr. Caruana, appeared on GBC last night declaring he didn't know why people were saying he was soft on Spain. And could someone please explain, as he didn't understand what soft on Spain meant? Could the Chief Minister explain why he thinks the GSD is soft on Spain?
Well, I suppose it's because I'm hard on Spain, and in anything that you try to compare. I think it's a matter of comparison between the different options. I don't think there's any doubt that the Lisbon and the Brussels agreements, which we have opposed in the GSLP going back to 1980, have been agreements which have been designed to give Spain a say in our future and in our decolonization. That is what they were there put in place for, and they all referred back to the 1960 UN resolutions, as I demonstrated last year before the 4th Committee of the United Nations. And therefore, in the context of the three parties that are contesting this election, and the one that isn't, the ACR that originally supported those agreements, the only one that is still prepared under whatever conditions they say of, you know, 2 flags, 3 voices, or anything else they care to call it, the only ones that are prepared to enter into that negotiating forum are the GST. I imagine that that is why they are considered to be softer than anybody else.
Okay, next question please, and it's down at the very end of the hall there.
Yes, good evening, Chief Minister.
Hello.
I would like to know whether it was a good idea or not to visit the United Nations, contrary to the advice given by the British government. Thank you.
It was a decision that was taken by the Council of Ministers jointly with the executive of the party, precisely because the advice I got from the Foreign Office was very negative. And the origin of that advice was Sir David Haney, who was the UK rep at the United Nations, who incidentally was the man that incorrectly advised the previous government on the Spanish pensions in 1984, when he was then in the European Union as the UK representative. We took a calculated risk in the knowledge that this was going to upset the United Kingdom, and on the background that they were telling us that the effect was going to be negative in that it would upset Spain, that would become nastier with us, not that they're ever particularly nice, and that the effect could be that the UN Committee of 24 would become more hostile, seeing as how they had already decided in 1968 that we should be handed over to Spain by October 1969, we came to the conclusion that they couldn't be any more hostile than that. I think with the benefit of hindsight, we can now say we took the right decision, although we took a calculated risk, that we've been successful in putting across a message to the UN about the right of self-determination of our people, which has found a certain warmth and response, and that even Spain is now worrying about the possibility that our right might be recognized by the UN, because Senor Spiteri was admitting that possibility last year, and the UK now is less against the idea. I think it's also worth pointing out that the Falkland Islands has been going there, and that the UK didn't try and stop them going there, presumably because they are committed in the constitution of the Falkland Islands to recognizing self-determination.
We must go to the next subject, the lady with the jean shirt.
Mr. Bossano, why have numerous members of the elderly citizens been receiving personal phone calls from the GSLP asking them to become members of this party, while the rest of the younger family members have not received such phone calls? Unfortunately, a lot of our elderly people are unable to cope with their own personal lives, let alone the extremely complex life offered by politics. Thank you.
Well, I can tell you that when we called a meeting of the party for our senior citizens, this place was so full up that we had to turn a lot of them away. The party has a very substantial number of senior citizens in its ranks already, and we hope to get many more of them, and it also has a flourishing youth section. And of course it is the desire of the party that every single Gibraltarian should become a GSLP member.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from the end of the hall there.
Hello.
Why did this GSLP administration allow the launch activity to escalate to the point that the people had to take to the streets to tell the government enough was enough?
As I recall the sequence of events, the people took to the streets not because the launch activity had reached any particular level, but because there had been a situation in which a number of boat owners took the law into their own hands, and the demonstration that followed was a rejection of that public disorder and a response from the general public in support of the law enforcement agencies. I was presented then by a request by 22 representatives of different organizations asking that we should take immediate steps to stop the activity that was taking place, where tobacco was being bought here, and the people who were selling the tobacco, selling the petrol, and selling the gold chains to those who exported the tobacco. And made a lot of money in the process, had not seemed to be objecting very strongly until that point in time. But nevertheless, since there was a very clear demand from a very large cross-section of Gibraltar's population that we should stop it, we stopped it where it ought to be stopped, which was at the people who are making the biggest profits, which was the importers.
The next question comes from this section here, the lady in the striped top.
Mr. Bossano, will you please reassure all the people of Gibraltar that their vote is secret, regardless of anything they may have been told to the contrary? Thank you.
Well, I don't know anybody that has told them anything to the contrary so far in this election. I know that it has been said in the previous election, and it may be since the GSD party in January 1992 was saying to people in their manifesto that we were intimidating them. Maybe they told them then that we were intimidating them, and they told them that we would know how they voted, and maybe that's why 73% voted for us. I don't think that's why it was. I think it was because we convinced them we were the best solution for Gibraltar's future.
Thank you very much. And our next question comes from that end of the hall. It's a lady with a yellow blouse.
Good evening, Mr. Bossano.
Hello.
We'd like to know why the GSLP administration has not opened management vacancies for graduates who come back and return from studying in joint venture companies and allow the managers of these joint venture companies to be unqualified in most all of them.
Well, there are 3 joint venture companies. They are Giptel, which was a joint venture company created in 1987 before we were in office, Ninex, which is the company that was created by the former government employees in the telephone department, and Lyonès de Sceaux, where the government holding is 1/3, and there is a French company that holds 2/3. In all of them, there are agreements between the company as an employer and the union representing the employees, and in all of them, there is a standard policy, as there is in the government, that vacancies are opened internally. I think one of the things I can understand that young people coming back qualified aspire to having jobs which reflect their capacity intellectually, which they've proved by going to university. But I think we also have to balance that against the fact that the opportunity to go to university is today far greater than it was in the past, and that there are many people who would go to university had we been in office, and who before we were in office couldn't go because there was a pointage system that limited the numbers going to UK to about 40. And therefore, the people who didn't get the opportunity to go clearly expect also to have an opportunity to progress within their place of employment. These things are covered by company union agreements, as they are indeed in the government and in most other places, in the fire service, in the police service. Promotion is internal.
Next question comes from the gentleman there in the sweatshirt.
Good evening, Mr. Bossano. I would like to know what progress have you made since the last election on the Constitution with regard to the common market? Thank you.
Well, I think the only real progress we've made in relation to the common market has been in the agreement we did very early on in 1992, which I announced, I think, in 1993, where the United Kingdom accepted that the laws of Gibraltar would be counted as if they were the laws of a member state. At this very moment, that is being challenged by Spain, and there is a directive that has been blocked since December last year, precisely because Spain doesn't want to see our laws being treated as if they were the laws of a sovereign state. Other than that, I regret to say we have made very little progress, because one of the things we put in the manifesto was that there was a need to review the division between defined domestic matters and foreign affairs, because if you classify everything on which there is a directive as foreign affairs, then there is practically nothing left that is domestic. There are directives on quality of water, there are directives on quality of air, so that means that even if the air and the water becomes foreign affairs, there's hardly anything left. Although the UK has agreed on many, many occasions that this is something that needs to be addressed, in practical terms, other than in the recognition of our own laws as community laws, which, as I said, is being challenged by Spain, we haven't done anything which is reflected constitutionally.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bossano. And next question comes from down the hall there, the lady in the white blouse, I think, at the very end. At the very end.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Bossano, would you accept that the business community is doing very badly?
Well, we accept that within the business community there are some businesses that are doing badly and some that are not. The evidence that we have is based on global statistics, not on individual statistics. That is to say, the government doesn't have access to the individual accounts of each business in Gibraltar, but we get an overall picture which is a reflection of the level of profits that they pay on their taxes. And as I've said before, the information that is available to the government is that in every single year since 1988, the sales and the profits, and therefore the tax paid as 35% of that profit, has gone up without interruption. And in fact, in 94-95, it reached an all-time record, to the extent that the amount that was declared in profits in 94-95 alone was 8 times what it was in 1987-88, the year that we came in. We've also seen that the volume of imports goes up, and that is a reflection of business turnover, and that again was a record figure for 1995. And of course, the numbers employed in the private sector is higher now than it's ever been before, and that is a reflection of the employment capacity of the private sector. But within that, there is something that needs to be addressed, which we've taken steps to address, and that is to see where there are problems that affect an industry or problems that affect a particular business. And as many other countries in Europe have come to the same conclusion, that it is by directing help to the small business that you create a flourishing and expanding private sector, we feel that it needs to be concentrated in that area.
Thanks, Mr. Bossano. Next question from the gentleman there. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Bossano. Could you explain why there was a need for the 1st of July law?
Yes. I know this has been a controversial and difficult issue, and that it's difficult sometimes to understand. We raised with the United Kingdom government in August '92 the difficulty that the Gibraltar labour market was experiencing in an open frontier situation and with the impact of the MOD cuts, and we asked them to honour a pledge that they had given us in 1984, which was given by Baroness Young and by Sir David Haney, who was then the UK rep in the EEC, that something known as the Greek protocol, which was attached to the conditions of Spanish entry, could be invoked at any time in the future if the result of the enlargement of the market disrupted the labour market of a member state, in order to find a community solution. The UK came back saying that they thought it was a difficult case to pursue, and in May '93 I received a petition asking the government to take action to give priority of employment to first to Gibraltarians, then to other existing long-term residents, and that newcomers should be the last in the list. The UK said that under community law we could only restrict UK nationals. We took the matter, in fact, in a motion in the House on the 12th of December 1993, which was carried unanimously, and we went back to the UK with that motion, asking them, as an alternative to the rule that we put for work permits for UK nationals, to go back to the Commission and get us a European solution which would affect everybody. I have to tell you that in practice the biggest competition for existing resident United Kingdom nationals and those who were here in '93, as well as Gibraltarians, has tended to come from new arrivals from the UK or from up the coast, because they are the ones who compete for white-collar jobs because of the language and the qualifications. Frankly, most of the competition for jobs in the private sector from Spanish labor tends to be in low-paid jobs like waiters.
Many thanks. And the question there at the very end of the hall now.
Good evening, Mr. Bossano. I would like to know why there was a refusal to a local investigation to the Baltic affair, why the GDP Foundation was formed, to whose benefit, and who's controlling it. Thank you.
Well, the investigation was carried out by the owners of Baltica because they alleged that one of their employees had been mishandling the money with which he was charged as their general manager. It was carried out from Denmark by Danes, and we provided in Gibraltar the necessary assistance so that they could obtain whatever information they needed at this end. But the person was charged and prosecuted in Denmark, and in fact, I believe that at the end of the day, they only found him guilty of the numbers of people they charged. All of them were discharged except one individual who was found guilty of allegedly selling an option in relation to the incinerator, and that is still the subject of an appeal. The case is still open because the individual has appealed against the decision of the court. As I have said many times, the GDP Foundation is not something in which the government has ever had any interest, either in using it or in financing it. It is something that the Danes put up with Danish money, and I'm afraid you'll have to ask them or their local lawyers, who I believe are in the other camp.
And one final question from the gentleman in the car.
Good evening, Mr. Bossano. Why do UK citizens have more difficulty with the new identity cards than in the old system? Thank you.
Yes. I think this is an issue, in fact, that has got somehow caught up with the work permit 1st of July law and has created a certain amount of confusion because it happened at about the same time. The ID cards we used to give before, we gave to everybody, including people living in Spain. And it was a piece of paper that was totally worthless because it was not recognized by anybody outside Gibraltar. In order to be able to get our identity card recognized as a travel document in the single market, we had to negotiate with the Home Office in UK a format, which is the one we have now, and a criteria for eligibility, because it is a national identity card which refers to the nationality of the holder. What we have now, therefore, is that a UK belonger in Gibraltar or a Gibraltarian gets an identity card which shows he is somebody that has got permanent residence in Gibraltar and he can use it as a travel document. And what those who don't belong in that category get is a card which is exactly the same in appearance as the ID card, but is actually evidence of residence. That is of particular importance, of course, to non-EEC nationals who, in order to travel with their passport, require that as evidence that there is a place to which they can be returned if there is any problem. Of course, the people who live in Spain and come into Gibraltar and used to get ID cards are no longer eligible here because they're supposed to be getting the documentation in their country of residence and not in their place of employment under community law.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bossano. And that's time up for the GSLP. We'll return shortly here on The Alternative.
If you're unable to vote at your designated polling station because you're ill, you can apply to the returning officer at the House of Assembly to be included in the absentee voters list. This will enable you to vote at your hospital, home, or wherever you're staying as a patient. Applications should be sent not later than the 10th of May, 1996.
Thomas Cook in the Caribbean, Thomas Cook on the Nile, Thomas Cook in Canada. Thomas Cook, the travel service of unequal calibre, now also in Gibraltar. The UK's leading travel company, together with Exchange and the Mossy Travel, are now all rolled into one to allow you to really enjoy the world.
Abecassis Gonzalez for all types of floor covering and the very best in pine furniture at really affordable prices. Abecassis Gonzalez of Cinnamon Lane for solid pine and durable flooring.
The latest Peralta store in Rosier Road for Iceland products, all at the best prices. Cut price offers from Peralta's, Gibraltar's popular supermarkets.
Need a mechanic? MeFix on 40520, recently opened, ground floor, Rose Bay Court. Repairs on cars and scooters at MeFix at competitive prices. Ring and they'll fix it.
The exhaust centre of 59 Devils Tower Road is now open for business. A unique 3-band price structure to suit all pockets is now on offer, all guaranteed. Systems available off the shelf or on special order. The exhaust centre of 59 Devils Tower Road, open for business.
Overland Europe with Trident Freight Services for the top groupage cargo service from London on Mondays and Fridays and Manchester on Thursdays. Call Trident Freight Services. Put Europe on your doorstep with weekly services from Paris and Rotterdam. Ring 42140. At Trident, they care for you and your cargo.
Treat your clothes to a first-class service at Quicksec Dry Cleaners. From ties to wedding dresses, plus curtains, duvets and quilts. Quicksec, opposite the Piccadilly Gardens. Telephone 74000 or Europort on 41323. Special discounts on all uniforms.
Step into Hollard and view their new range of fitted kitchens, tailor-made to your requirements. Take your ideas and colours and Hollards will work with you to create your dream kitchen. Also just received an exciting range of lighting. Hollards.
Years ago, Gibraltar's wartime evacuees started to return home. For many, this meant severe hardship as they waited for new houses to be built. For 40 years, housing was the biggest single problem in Gibraltar. Following the successful introduction of the home ownership schemes in the 80s, Montague Crescent is the latest addition to this exciting new concept. Approved by the government under the shared home ownership scheme and based on the popular design of Montague Gardens, construction of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom apartments has already started. For more information, call in at our offices at Montague Pavilion or ring 72035.
Luigi of Engineer Lane for ladies' clothing, fashion lingerie and swimwear. Luigi for cosmetics and skincare, for tights and stockings. Luigi for Skoll orthopedic sandals. Luigi of 54 Engineer Lane.
Car Care Centre, Water Gardens for all your motoring needs. Extensive range of spare parts at discount prices, always in stock or 24 hours away. Their shop and fit package takes care of all your motoring headaches locally. So save time and money. Shop at Car Care Centre.
Trident Freight Services are the most competitive and extensive Far East groupage service to Gibraltar. For services from Bangkok, Bombay, Hong Kong, Singapore and Yokohama, call Trident Freight Services on 42140, where they care for you and your cargo.
Castile-Windsor are now in their 11th year, continuing to achieve success and always taking pride in the way they deliver service and sound advice to their clients. The client is always central in their decisions, and this is why Castile-Windsor continues to make all the right moves.
50 years ago, Gibraltar's wartime evacuees started to return home. For many, this meant severe hardship as they waited for new houses to be built. For 40 years, housing was the biggest single problem in Gibraltar. Following the successful introduction of the home ownership schemes in the 80s, Montague Crescent is the latest addition to this exciting new concept. Approved by the government under the shared home ownership scheme and based on the popular design of Montague Gardens, construction of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom apartments has already started. For more information, call in at our offices at Montague Pavilion or ring 72035.
Argos at Tony's Supercentre. Argos household and leisure products all in stock. Now even faster delivery with every weekly order. Argos showrooms and sales at Tony's Supercentre on Devil's Tower Road. Telephone 51051. Argos, the shop with all the answers.
Want to make your money stretch and stretch? Then visit Nelson's Menswear at 15 Engineer Lane. There you'll find top quality men's clothing at special offer prices. Everything from casual to formal shirts. Prices at Nelson's Menswear start at £1. Hurry and visit them now.
Picasso's Cafeteria and Restaurant is open daily for coffee, lunch and tea from 8:30 in the morning. Great dishes to choose from and delicious cakes, all in a friendly and relaxed atmosphere. Picasso's at 22 Main Street. Call 51551.
Have a break. Have a Kit Kat. A snack for any occasion. Ideal milk, rich in vitamins, ideal for tea, coffee, sauces and desserts. Give something special. Give Quality Street. The perfect gift every time. Tip Top, the perfect milk for slimmers, low in fat and cholesterol.
Welcome back to Election 96, The Alternatives, live from the John Macintosh Hall Theatre. An opportunity for the audience here to put questions to the leaders of the parties who will be contesting the forthcoming general election on May the 16th. The next leader is the leader of the National Party, Dr. Joseph Garcia. Thank you very much. And the first question comes from the gentleman in the shirt.
Hello, Mr. Garcia. My name is Wilfred Lima. Could you please expand how dangerous is the Brussels Agreement, which at the moment is being contemplated only by Caruana and the rest of, his member political party or movement? I call them a movement. Thank you very much.
Before I start, I'd like to thank you for your question. I think that we have always maintained as a party that Brussels is extremely dangerous for Gibraltar for a number of reasons. The first one would be because Brussels is the product of the resolutions of the United Nations which say that Gibraltar should become part of Spain. So the outcome of the talks has already been decided before we walk in through the door. Secondly, the Gibraltar is expected to attend as part of the Foreign Office and not as Gibraltarians in our own rights, which is what we would wish. And thirdly, there's also the danger of attending a process which we have been to in the past and which has failed. We saw that very clearly with the airport agreement, where the airport agreement developed as a result of talks held under Brussels on the 10th of December 1987. We've seen that very clearly with the Spanish pensions case, which still continues today, or so I've heard, and which also emerged from a round of talks under the Brussels Agreement in 1985. So I think Brussels is extremely dangerous to Gibraltar. It has already been proved historically to have failed. Even when Gibraltar was there, we didn't get anywhere. So I think it's very important to remember that people who talk about Brussels as if it were something new and something which hasn't been tried are completely mistaken. Brussels is a danger for Gibraltar we cannot attend.
Dr. Garcia, could you tell us what you think of the other two parties' plans for decolonization of Gibraltar?
Well, really, I don't know what the other two parties' plans are for the decolonization of Gibraltar. I can tell you what our own plan is in the National Party, which is very simple and very straightforward. We believe the future of Gibraltar should be decided by the people of Gibraltar, because that is what matters in any democratic society. But also a party which, broadly speaking, is generally pro-European, which means that we see the future of Gibraltar as being in Europe. We believe that Gibraltar, the people of Gibraltar should have their rightful place in Europe. And that is the reason why, as a party, we've been very active campaigning in defense of our rights within the European Union. I mean, not just that, I'm sure you'll also remember I personally visited the Council of Europe in Strasbourg in September of last year, and it proved very useful and very enlightening and an important forum to put Gibraltar's point of view across. Our own policy is for Gibraltar to become a city-state within the European Union under Her Majesty the Queen. That would ensure, firstly, that we don't breach the Treaty of Utrecht, which we think is absolute rubbish and totally irrelevant to the decolonization of Gibraltar anyway. And secondly, that it wouldn't breach the Treaty of Rome. Because I remember a Spanish politician saying not that long ago that Gibraltar couldn't be decolonized because it would breach the Treaty of Rome and we would have to reapply to join. That is absolute rubbish. If we find a framework whereby Britain remains responsible for the foreign affairs of Gibraltar, like the framework which we propose, that does not breach the Treaty of Rome, and Gibraltar therefore is perfectly entitled and perfectly legitimized in remaining within the European Union. That is our own program for the decolonization of Gibraltar.
And for our next question, we go down to the gentleman there.
Dr. Garcia, your party has spoken about changing the voting system. Could you elaborate on how you would change the voting system in Gibraltar, please?
I think in a small place like Gibraltar, it is difficult to find a system which fits exactly. So what we have to aim for is a system which is more representative of the way in which people cast their vote. So from our point of view, the present system which we have at the moment is totally unrepresentative. It is a system which is colonial, which was put in place by the colonial power to divide and conquer the people of Gibraltar, which is something which they've done in every other colony, and they're also trying to do it here. So we believe the present system allows, in theory, for a party to obtain 90% of the votes and win 8 seats, and yet the party that obtains 10% of the votes would have 7 seats. So the flaw with the voting system is that it does not reflect the way in which you cast your votes when you go into the ballot box. That is why it is something which we should change, and it will be contained in our election manifesto. There are various alternatives which people have put forward. Until 1969, the system used in the Legislative Council of Gibraltar was proportional representation, being the single transferable vote. That system was abandoned then because it was too cumbersome, and the system which we have today was born in the City Council elections of July 1945, and really we've developed that system up to the present day. Now, what we are calling for is for a new system, for a system which would directly reflect the way in which people vote, whether that is proportional representation, whether that is a constituency system whereby you elect your own MP in your own area of Gibraltar, and that MP is then directly accountable to you in a very direct manner, because if he doesn't do his work, you'll throw him out at the next elections. So whether that is a system which is put in place, whether it's proportional representation, or whether it's a completely new system in line with the needs of Gibraltar, the basic point is it has to be changed.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next question, and we go down, I believe, to the end of the hall here.
Good evening, Doctor. So what would you say to people that say that you're the puppets of the GSLP?
I think anybody who knows me will realize we're not the puppets. We're not the puppets of anyone. I'm the leader of the National Party. I lead a team of 7 candidates, and I'm very proud to do that. We may be fortunate or unfortunate that our policies happen to coincide with those of other people at some times, and those with other people other times. But from our own point of view, anybody who argues that simply cannot understand plain English, because if you read our statements in the press, and if you listen to what we've been saying in television, or rather if anybody who thinks that listens and reads, they will realize that we have criticized the GSLP 238 times up to the end of 1995 in our press statements, and the GSD only 27. So I think that proves the point in a statistical way, and it really cannot be challenged. I really have nothing further to add.
Thank you. And for our next question, the gentleman on the front row.
Dr. Garcia, what are the main differences between your party and the rest?
Well, really that question follows from the one that I've just been asked. I think anybody who listens to what the National Party says will realize that we stand for very vital things to all of us. One of them, and of paramount importance in relation to external affairs, is the fact that the future of Gibraltar should only be decided by the Gibraltarians, because that is what democracy means. Unfortunately, it is something which hasn't been readily understood in Spain by people like Cesar Rangel. It hasn't been understood in Britain either, which is perhaps even more unfortunate. But so on external affairs, we are different to the GSLP, because our line is that we would be prepared to attend dialogue, which is tripartite, rather fully tripartite, and not flags and voices and dressing tables, fully tripartite. Not predetermined in any direction, and with an open agenda where sovereignty is not negotiable, because anybody who is prepared to attend talks under Brussels is prepared to discuss sovereignty under the UN resolutions which say
Thank you very much. Please let Dr. Garcia continue this answer.
Which say that Gibraltar should be part of Spain. There's no way out of that. So that is our policy on that front. Internally, I think we differ with the GSLP on practically everything else, and our statements hitting them out on the economy or education or health speak for themselves. With the GSD, obviously, it's more in relation to external affairs. Perhaps we may coincide internally. At times we've issued almost identical statements on particular issues. I remember one of them being North Gorge, the people who live over there and the plights which they had.
Dr. Garcia, many thanks indeed.
Externally, we differ completely.
We'll have to move on to the next one. And the lady at the very end.
Mr. Garcia, could you please tell me what are your plans for the future regarding the youth of Gibraltar? Thank you.
Well, we have often been accused of being a party that is young. It is something which I reject, because we have people in a candidature from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. So we actually cover all the age groups from 20 to 60. The youth of Gibraltar is something which is obviously very close to our heart. We have issued continuous statements in the press calling for a graduate employment policy which would ensure that our people who go to study in the United Kingdom receive priority of employment when they return to Gibraltar, because education is an investment in the future. Education is an investment in our youth. Our youth are the future of Gibraltar, and without them, we don't have a future.
For our next question, we go to the very end of that aisle over there, the gentleman in the reddish shirt.
Good evening, Mr. Garcia. In your opinion, how damaging has the GSD been in the unity
in fighting off the Brussels sellout.
I think it's important to realize that if you have a fundamental belief, and that belief is that the Gibraltarians have a right to self-determination and a right to decide what they want to be, then really that is completely contradictory to a process like Brussels, which decides the final outcome before you actually start talking. So I think then if the aim is to strive and to fight for a new forum of dialogue, it does not help if there are still people in Gibraltar who cling to the old. I think it is damaging in the sense that the United Kingdom would probably be prepared to look at a new forum if there was a united front in Gibraltar, and it's very important that on fundamental matters the people of Gibraltar should be united, because we may have our differences. We do have our differences with the GSLP. We have our differences also with the GSD. But at the end of the day, we'd like to think that we are all Gibraltarians, that we all have to live together after the 17th of May, and that we'd better get our act together before other people decide things for us.
Gentleman at the very end. Dr. Garcia, if you were to be elected into government, will you do away with the Spanish labor?
Thank you for your question. We are, I think, the only political party in Gibraltar to have tackled or to have mentioned the question of Spanish labor head on, really because we think it is an absolute disgrace that there should be so many Spaniards employed in Gibraltar at a time when there are so many people, so many Gibraltarians out of work. It is totally disgraceful. It is something that we intend to tackle. It is something that we intend to tackle, particularly at a time when the Spanish government seeks to undermine us economically and to sink us. Because you see, if you go to La Línea and try to find a job, the first thing they ask you for is for your residence permit, and if you don't have one, there's no job. Well, I think it's about time we did the same thing over here.
And there's another question now coming from the very end of the auditorium, the lady in the white shirt.
Mr. Garcia, how essential do you think constitutional reform will be in the next 4 years?
Thank you. Well, we launched the constitutional plan in our last manifesto in 1992. We'll have one also in the new manifesto, which is to come out. I would urge people to read it and to analyze it, because, you see, one thing which is vitally important in terms of constitutional change is that a constitution is a living organism. It is something which changes, which develops, and which adapts with time. It is not something which remains stuck since 1969 and which doesn't move from there. So one thing which we would like to see removed are the reserved powers of the governor. We think that they are extremely colonial, that a governor should not have the power to overrule an elected chamber representing the people of Gibraltar. That is one point. Another point is the question of having appointed members in an elected House of Assembly. That is repugnant to me, and I'm sure to many of you as well. So those are two issues, but there is the broader question, which is clarifying once and for all the position of Gibraltar in the European Union in relation to the United Kingdom and in relation to Europe. Because at the moment we seem to be in a position where we are in Europe for the liabilities to pay the Spanish pensions. Yes, we are in Europe to pay them the pensions, but even today somebody called me to let me know there was a 3.5-hour queue at the frontier, which only was removed when this lady came out and started giving instructions to the civil guards, which shows what we all know, that the queues at the border are deliberate and generated by Spain. We need to find a permanent and secure status for Gibraltar in Europe. And the only way to do that is through constitutional change. Spain has nothing to do with it.
And I believe there's a question now coming from the end of the auditorium, as soon as we can.
Mr. Garcia, how important is Gibraltar's strive to get voting rights in Europe?
Well, there was some very positive news this time from Michael Yamas and the team that went to Strasbourg, which I think was a landmark, and we'll see what develops from there. But as a party, we had that in our election manifesto in 1992. We made a promise in 1992, and perhaps, like others, we keep our promises. We've campaigned for 4 years very strongly on this issue. We've been in touch practically with everybody there is to be in touch with in Europe, the European Commission, the President of the Parliament, Klaus Hansch, the Commission President, Jacques Santer, the Committee of Civil Liberties of the Parliament itself, so the European Citizens Action Service, ECAS, and lately the European Ombudsman, as probably most of you know through the press. So we've actually mounted a campaign which is really unprecedented in the history of Gibraltar and in terms of a party which it was not even elected at that time. We hope that changes now, and which is completely unpaid and done on a voluntary basis. So we mounted an enormous campaign seeking for the people of Gibraltar their legitimate rights in Europe, the right to vote in elections to the European Parliament, because that is a basic and a fundamental democratic right of any people. So, and if the people of Gibraltar think that we have done well for them, when we get elected, we're going to do even better. That's one thing. And secondly, the broad and general issue of Europe, of voting rights, of a free-flowing frontier, of having a reciprocity of employment with Spaniards if they give reciprocity to us, and of blocking them when they block us. Because really the only way they're going to learn in Spain is with that kind of tactic. I think the French and the Canadians showed them how to do it.
Thank you very much. And our next question comes from this gentleman at the very front.
Dr. Garcia, according to the latest scandal that's going on with the Hindu workers, I'd like to know what's your opinion on that and what you would do in order to make life easier for them, if there is anything that can be done.
Well, I think from the point of view of the party, you see, we have a broad political philosophy, which is a philosophy of equal rights, be that between men and women, be that between all the different nationalities which exist in Gibraltar. So based upon that political philosophy, we have our policies, and our policy in relation to this particular issue is really quite simple, and it really cannot be anything else. It can only be that everybody who lives in Gibraltar is part of Gibraltar. And therefore, the policy of equal rights would also be extended to that area. One thing which we have already done is been in touch with the people who raised the issue in the first place in the press. And what we've mentioned to them is whether they could actually supply us with a list and seeing how many people are actually involved, how many people are affected by this problem, and trying to do our very best to sort it out for them. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. And are there any other questions to come from the floor? Any other questions? Well, since there are none at this time, Dr. Garcia, let me ask you one. The AACR has withdrawn its candidature. Do you think that that is going to help you in any way?
Well, really, I don't think it really has a bearing on the general election. As ourselves, we are quite confident. We believe the election should be fought on issues and on policies. We intend to release the manifesto, which I have here, which we'll be releasing early next week. We hope that people read the manifesto. I think it's important that people understand what each political party stands for, what each political party represents, and that they cast their vote in a positive manner. You see, you may very well be unhappy with the GSLP and the way in which they have run Gibraltar, but the solution is not to cast a negative vote and go somewhere else. The solution is to vote positive and to vote for policies that you believe in. The election should not be about personalities. It should certainly not be about petty bickering. It should not be about name-calling, and it should not be about abusing each other. It should be about policies, about solutions to get the Gibraltarians and to get Gibraltar working again. That is what we feel the election should be.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the floor? There is one question from the gentleman in the red shirt down here. It'll be our final question for Dr. Garcia. Please wait until the microphone
gets to you.
Dr. Garcia, in the event of a hung assembly, can you tell me how you would reconcile with one party who has treated the House of Assembly almost with contempt and ruled by decree, and another one who is completely soft on Spain?
Well, it's actually perhaps a more difficult question than anybody could imagine. It's not an issue which we have even discussed in our party or in our committee. We believe that we are going to this election with 8 candidates, with a strong team, with a strong manifesto, and we're hoping to win the election. If that doesn't happen, and if there is a hung parliament, as there was in 1969, with this same system of voting, and if the people of Gibraltar ask us to decide who the next government is going to be, we're going to have to think very carefully, because as you say, internally we have the problem of the GSLP, who have conducted the business of government in an intolerable manner internally, in the sense of very few meetings of the House of Assembly, a general lack of accountability and a general lack of openness. And yet on the other hand, we have the worrying problem, the worrying doubt as to whether you can really trust the GSD on the question of Spain.
Dr. Garcia.
So if we are put in a position where we have to choose, it is not something which we are going to take lightly. And perhaps if the people of Gibraltar want that to happen, and if they want a moderating influence in a future government, they have 8 votes. They should use those 8 votes very wisely.
Dr. Garcia, many thanks indeed. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. Time is up now for the National Party. Many thanks for your questions, and we'll be back after the break.
Facilities are available for you to be able to vote if you're not in Gibraltar on the 16th of May, that's polling day, to vote by post. Applications on a special form for postal voting can be obtained from the House of Assembly. For more information, contact the returning officer at the House of Assembly. Application forms must be returned as soon as possible and not later than noon on the 8th of May.
50 years ago, Gibraltar's wartime evacuees started to return home. For many, this meant severe hardship as they waited for new houses to be built. For 40 years, housing was the biggest single problem in Gibraltar. Following the successful introduction of the home ownership schemes in the 80s, Montague Crescent is the latest addition to this exciting new concept. Approved by the government under the shared home ownership scheme and based on the popular design of Montague Gardens, construction of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom apartments has already started. For more information, call in at our offices at Montague Pavilion or ring 72035.
Come to Mijas Aquatic Park. Water fun for the whole family. Come and enjoy yourselves. Parque Acuático Mijas on the Fuengirola Bypass, Mijas Costa.
Blossom's Wedding Bells, Gibraltar's exclusive bridal shop. Wedding gowns from £400. All wedding accessories for that special day available from Blossom's Wedding Bells of Engineer Lane.
Connections Discotheque is where you want to be every weekend. The newest, hottest night spot in town you don't want to miss. Making all the right connections at Connections Discotheque. Connections Discotheque, opposite the airport with free parking.
Thomas Cook in the Caribbean. Thomas Cook on the Nile. Thomas Cook in Canada. Thomas Cook, the travel service of unequalled calibre, now also in Gibraltar. The UK's leading travel company, together with Exchange and the Mossy Travel, are now all rolled into one to allow you to really enjoy the world.
Look out for jeans with the red stripe label exclusively at Lewis Bernard, 255 to 257 Main Street. Jeans at £12.99 or buy 2 pairs for just £22. Be a winner with lasting quality jeans. Different colours and styles for all the family. Look out for the red stripe only at Lewis Bernard.
If what you need is professional service, affordable premiums, protection for your home, business, vehicle and your family, contact Masbro Insurance Brokers for your free quotation.
MRW Couriers of George's Lane for speed, efficiency and reliability. Services include local messenger, international mailing and translations. MRW Couriers serving the Finance Centre, Gibraltar and the world. You know about the rest. Now try the best.
Meadow Cup, Gibraltar's favourite spread. The taste of butter with less fat. Available at leading stores in Gibraltar.
With over 70 years' experience, George Gallero Builders Merchants and Samats Limited, the largest and most reputable suppliers to the building trade on the Rock, continue to expand their range of goods for the home builder and the DIYer. Pop into their showrooms at 18 Halifax Road, North Front.
50 years ago, Gibraltar's wartime evacuees started to return home. For many, this meant severe hardship as they waited for new houses to be built. For 40 years, housing was the biggest single problem in Gibraltar. Following the successful introduction of the home ownership schemes in the 80s, Montague Crescent is the latest addition to this exciting new concept. Approved by the government under the shared home ownership scheme and based on the popular design of Montague Gardens, construction of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom apartments has already started. For more information, call in at our offices at Montague Pavilion or ring 72035.
Lewis P. Borge, sole distributors in Gibraltar for Colfax and Fowler, Jane Churchill, Warner and Harris Fabrics, together with the Sanderson range, a most extensive selection in furnishing fabrics and wallpapers. Furniture in the best British tradition, wood floorings and carpets and rugs to meet all budgets. Lewis P. Borge, 4 Kingsyard Lane.
Overland Europe with Trident Freight Services for the top groupage cargo service from London on Mondays and Fridays and Manchester on Thursdays. Call Trident Freight Services. Put Europe on your doorstep with weekly services from Paris and Rotterdam. Ring 42140 at Trident. They care for you and your cargo.
Thomas Cook in the Caribbean. Thomas Cook on the Nile. Thomas Cook in Canada. Thomas Cook, the travel service of unequal calibre, now also in Gibraltar. The UK's leading travel company, together with Exchange and the Mossy Travel, are now all rolled into one to allow you to really enjoy the world.
Be careful when using Hawaiian Tropic, because the rich blend of exotic oils, tropical flora, fruits and nuts has been known to attract sharks.
Hi, come here often? What's your sign?
You must be a mom. But with sunscreens from 2 to 30, it's still the best way to save your skin. Hawaiian Tropic. It's beach made.
Step into Hollard and view their new range of fitted kitchens, tailor-made to your requirements. Take your ideas and colors, and Hollards will work with you to create your dream kitchen. Also just received an exciting range of lighting. Hollards.
Castile Windsor are now in their 11th year, continuing to achieve success and always taking pride in the way they deliver service and sound advice to their clients. The client is always central in their decisions, and this is why Castile Windsor continues to make all the right moves.
Want to make your money stretch and stretch? Then visit Nelson's Menswear of 15 Engineer Lane. There you'll find top quality men's clothing at special offer prices. Everything from casual to formal shirts. Prices at Nelson's Menswear start at £1. Hurry and visit them now. Have a break, have a Kit Kat, a snack for any occasion. Ideal milk, rich in vitamins, ideal for tea, coffee, sauces and desserts.
Give something special. Give Quality Street, the perfect gift every time. Tip Top, the perfect milk for slimmers, low in fat and cholesterol.
Welcome back to Election 96, The Alternatives, coming to you on GBC Television, live from the John Macintosh Hall Theatre. The opportunity for our audience here tonight to put questions to the leaders of the three main parties contesting the 1996 election of May the 16th. We've heard from two parties. The third and final one now is the Gibraltar Social Democrats. Please welcome Peter Caruana, its leader. Thank you very much, and our first question comes from over there, that gentleman down there.
Good evening.
Well, there seems to be a problem with that microphone at the moment. So we'll get this gentleman to ask the question right now. There we are.
Good evening, Mr. Caruana. Could you please explain to the electorate why a GSD government is a preferred option of a hostile Spain intent on recouping the sovereignty of Gibraltar whilst undermining the humanitarian rights of Gibraltarians? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now let Mr. Caruana answer that. Thank you.
Well, of course, I don't accept the premise of your question. The only party that I have heard endorsed from Spain by Senor Graña is the GSLP, whom he says...
Silence, please. Let Mr. Caruana answer.
Who said that a Bossano government was good for Spain. And a Bossano government is good for Spain because of the enormous damage that his style of government brings on Gibraltar internationally, causing damage to our economy and our ability to create inward investments and jobs, and indeed driving a wedge between Gibraltar and Britain. Frankly...
Quiet, please. Can we please have some order in the floor?
Frankly, not in all the political history of Gibraltar has Spain enjoyed a more successful 8-year period than it has since 1988.
Quiet, please. Can you treat all parties with respect whilst on this program? Mr. Caruana, thank you. And our next question is coming from the front.
Good evening, Mr. Caruana.
Good evening.
Is it true that Peter Montegrifo has challenged you for the leadership?
It is not true. It is pure wishful thinking on the part of our political opponents, who frankly have got no answer for the sheer strength and attractiveness of the team that the GSD has offered to the electorate. The GSD has spent 4 years constructing a party capable of governing Gibraltar for all of the Gibraltarians. I think we have succeeded in doing that, and I think that the electorate is going to recognize that on May the 16th. It is a tragedy. It is a tragedy that the born-again socialist Mr. Bossano should now be talking about class warfare and class enemy and class hatred in a vain and crude attempt to regain the support of the working class whose interests he has ignored for the last 8 years.
The end there, please. And our next question, please, from the very end of the auditorium, the gentleman with the red shirt again.
Good evening, Mr. Caruana. We all know how much Braña loves us, and we all know how much Patricio González likes Peter Montegrifo. But apart from that, your past relationship with the PAC your involvement with the pensions case, your support of the predetermined Brussels agreement, how can you deny you are soft on Spain?
Thank you. That question gives me a very welcome opportunity to clarify the record. I remember very clearly the headline from Patricio González, "My friend Joe." I only know of one chief minister of Gibraltar that has been given a crate of oranges in Spain and hugged by a Spanish politician and referred to as "my friend Joe," and it wasn't Peter Montegrifo. As far as the pensions case is concerned, any sincere and objective member of the GSLP will recognize that from the very beginning I have given 100% political support inside and outside of the House of Assembly to the GSLP government. And when public opinion has asked it of me, I have given up my partnership in a law firm. I have left the firm.
Silence, please. Silence.
In order to put professional distance away from a matter in which in any case I had no personal professional involvement and certainly I had no political difficulty.
Mr. Caruana, thank you. And our next question from the lady down there in the white shirt.
Good evening, Mr. Caruana. Is the GST so naive as to think that given Spain's track record of almost 300 years of continuous harassment towards Gibraltar and its people, that this party is going to alter the Spanish government's persistent efforts to recuperate the sovereignty of Gibraltar? Thank you.
No, certainly not. It is because the GSD is not so naive as to think that we alone in Gibraltar can persuade the Spaniards to give up their claim to sovereignty over our homeland that we believe that we mustn't put distance between our friends, which is why we believe in common with all other political parties in Gibraltar, that the sovereignty of Gibraltar is simply not negotiable with Spain. I want those who accuse the GSD and me of being soft on Spain to spell out in detail what it is they think that we're going to do, because we are certainly not willing to negotiate on sovereignty, we are certainly not willing to make any concessions to them, and we are certainly not willing to sell Gibraltar to Spain one piece of land at a time, and we're certainly not prepared to make the entrance of Gibraltar look like any other Spanish town with Cepsa petrol stations.
Thank you, Mr. Caruana. Before we continue, can we please have some order in the auditorium? Otherwise, we cannot proceed with the program. It is impossible for the audience at home to hear what Mr. Caruana has to say. Now, the next question comes from the person at the very back.
Good evening, Mr. Caruana. I want a firm commitment from the leader of the opposition. If you were to become the chief minister of Gibraltar, will you...
Silence, please.
Estamos entre suma. Will you make sure that an investigation will be carried out in accordance with all the Quangus company created by the GSLP government during his mandate?
Silence, please. Can you please
and
let Mr. Neto speak?
The real owner. Estamos entre suma. Este es el pueblo.
Mr. Neto, can you please have a brief question?
And also make an investigation in relation with the real owner of the fast launches.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neto. Just before we do continue, Mr. Caruana, please can we have order, can we have silence in the auditorium, otherwise people who are making noise will have to be escorted out. Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid that I'm afraid that due to the predominantly GSLP support in this hall, I have not been able to hear your question. But I think it relates to the obvious lack of transparency that there has been in public accountability over the last 4 years, indeed 8 years. If that is what your question related to, I can tell you that you know that the GST is committed not only when in government after the 16th of May, to implement a system of complete transparency in public accountability, and that includes the companies of which ministers are directors, owned by the public. Not only will we do that in respect of our years in office, but we have undertaken to publish accounts in respect of the last 8 years during which the GSLP has refused to publish the accounts of companies of which ministers are directors.
Thank you, Mr. Caruana. And our next question comes from the gentleman in the suit there. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Caruana.
Good evening, Mr.
Your political newspaper mocks Dr. Joseph Garcia's voice, and it also wishes somebody dead purely because they do not coincide with your own political views.
Yes.
Now, isn't that unchristian? Isn't that immoral?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Caruana.
If you are referring to the Gibraltarian, then I can categorically assure you, so that you are free of any view that you might have that the GST wishes anybody dead, that neither of those two views are held, sponsored or supported by the GST. Now I can tell you that the one political newspaper in Gibraltar that week in, week out contains a scurrilous campaign of personal abuse, systematic personal abuse of one opposition candidate at a time is the New People political newspaper of the GSLP.
And the next question comes from Mr. Lima down there, but you'll have to wait for a camera.
Hello, Mr.
to be able to pick you up,
Caruana. Would
please.
you please tell the people of Gibraltar, why do you think that Patricio González wants you in power, but he doesn't want you as his chief minister? He wants your colleague, Peter Montegrifo. Thank you.
Like me, he must recognize Peter Montegrifo's enormous skills and the enormous contribution that he has to make to the future of Gibraltar. Now let me tell you that to my certain knowledge, Peter Montegrifo has met Patricio González on 3 occasions. Once before he left politics, once when they bumped into each other shopping at Continente, and on the third occasion, it was when Patricio González was sitting in the Rock Hotel having lunch with Joe Bossano, and he got up to say hello to him. The only Gibraltar politician of whom I am aware has made it a point of coming out in the media hugging Spanish politicians is Joe Bossano and not Peter Montegrifo.
Okay, I think we're ready for the next question. The gentleman in the cardigan there.
Mr. Caruana, if you become chief minister, and we presume that you will attend the Brussels talks, what are you prepared to cede to the Spaniards in return for what?
Well, in the first place, we're not prepared to attend talks under any process of dialogue, Brussels or otherwise, unless Gibraltar has its own separate voice. Secondly, if your question was intending to suggest that we are willing to make concessions to Spain on sovereignty or on any other issue of consequence to Gibraltar? The answer is we are not. However, that is our position. However, what I think is extraordinary is those people who say that we are soft on Spain because we're willing to indulge in dialogue with Spain with a sovereignty veto and with our own voice, but claim that they are willing to have dialogue with Spain on an open agenda. Well, look, open agenda means open for both sides, and we all know that Spain is only interested in sovereignty, and therefore those people who say that they're willing to discuss with Spain on an open agenda must, if they are being honest, be recognizing that they are willing to discuss sovereignty with Spain, which I am not.
Thank you very much. And our next question comes from the gentleman in the black T-shirt.
Mr. Caruana, your party has been accused of scam. What are your opinions on it, please?
Well, I think it's a great tragedy that the man who is, for the time being, but not for much longer, the leader of this community, should set such a disgraceful example to our youth and our children in Gibraltar. Frankly, it is not surprising. It is not surprising that the GSLP have resorted to personal abuse, because they know that they have had 8 years to get this economy right, and they failed. And they know that we are the party with the skill, with the policies, and with the experience in business to get Gibraltar back to work. And the only thing that they can do, thinking that the people of Gibraltar are going to swallow it hook, line and sinker, which they are not, is to try and persuade the people of Gibraltar that we're either traitors or scum. They don't care which of the two, so long as the electorate believes one of them.
Thank you. I think we're ready for the next question, and it comes from this gentleman. Thank you.
Mr. Caruana, if the GST is elected into government, do you intend to continue with the 1st of July law?
Thank you for that question. We organized a petition against the 1st of July law, which was signed by nearly 12,000 Gibraltarians. And it was signed by 12,000 Gibraltarians because we recognize that we have to find a way of dealing with our employment problems which does not discriminate against British subjects in Gibraltar. We have got to find a way of putting our people back to work, which is on the basis of creating dignified, lasting jobs, on the basis of the business that we can attract to Gibraltar through a good international reputation and investment. The people of Gibraltar are not willing to tolerate a situation where a Spaniard has greater rights in Gibraltar than a British subject, because frankly, that is interpreted in Britain as being anti-British, and it puts in doubt the support that Gibraltar enjoys amongst British public opinion, which is our last line of defense against Spain's hostile claim. So the answer to your question is, first of all, we would repeal it, and if we can make the ETB work to keep people out of our labour market who live 5 minutes away from us, we don't need an anti-British law to keep people out who live 2,000 miles away.
Thank you. And the next question comes from this gentleman here. Can you please stand up to put your question?
Mr. Caruana, how can you defend...
Quiet, please. Can you please let this man talk?
Mr. Caruana, how can you defend the posture taken by two of your GSD candidates, namely Mr. Brito and Mr. Montegrifo, opposing the dismantling of the pointage system that has given the opportunity to over 500 of our youth this year alone to study abroad?
Speaking for the party that I lead, which is the GSD, we are entirely committed to the pointage system. I think that the introduction of the pointage system is certainly one of the good things that the GSLP have done, and we are committed to continuing.
Thank you very much. And the next question comes from the man in the patterned shirt, yes.
Mr. Caruana, I suppose you want Gibraltar's economy to flourish, don't you? Do you intend to do this by letting your party members shop in Continente? Thank you.
Certainly it will not form part of the GSD style of government to force people to do anything or to do anything against their wishes. But I can understand why there might be that fear in Gibraltar, because certainly if the recent old age pensioner membership recruitment campaign is anything to go by, then certainly some people in Gibraltar have got used to being forced to do things. As far as the GSD is concerned, it forms no part of our very exciting plans for making the economy of Gibraltar prosper. It forms no part of that to lock people up in Gibraltar. No part of that at all.
Thank you, Mr. Caruana. And once again, I must remind the audience to please keep quiet and let people talk, and let's have everyone have their say. Mr. Tunbridge.
Caruana, Mr. Bossano expressed Gibraltar's opinions at the United Nations. The GMP contributed by sending some of their relations. The GMP itself has lobbied thoroughly in the European Union. Who are you lobbying? Or who is lobbying you? Because nobody here knows.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caruana.
Well, in the first place, let me remind you that it was the GSD who suggested in May 1991, before Mr. Bossano's first visit to the United Nations, it was the GSD that suggested and recommended that Gibraltar needed to start lobbying at the United Nations. Certainly the GSD is committed to continue to lobby for recognition of Gibraltar's right to self-determination at the United Nations and indeed in the European Union. We have been active lobbyists in the House of Commons, amongst British MPs. Indeed, we have on numerous occasions recommended to the GSLP government that over a 4-year term, it would be a good investment to Gibraltar if we tried to bring every member of the House of Commons to Gibraltar over a 4-year period. And I can tell you that during the next 4 years of GSD government, we will try and bring as many UK MPs to Gibraltar as possible to lobby them here. We will continue to lobby it at the United Nations, but as the point of your question was clearly calculated to make the statement that I am being lobbied by Spanish politicians, let me tell you, by the Foreign Office.
Thank you very much, Mr. Caruana. Well, I've got to stop you there. That's the 2 minutes for that question. Final question from the gentleman at the very back.
Mr. Caruana, how does the GSD intend to finance all its intended policies in improving all these things that you mentioned in your manifesto?
Well, the GSD has a wide range of economic policies which will generate economic activity and jobs and therefore increased levels of revenue to the government. Having said that, I don't believe that government finances are bad at all at the moment. It's just that they're being
Can we have some order in the floor, please?
It's just that they're being badly applied. After all, the people of Gibraltar are the most highly taxed people in Europe, and they get least back for it in reply. If Mr. Bossano can give away every national day £250,000 to our pensioners, £500,000 to Mount Alvernia, and continue to finance all the electoral goodies and all the electoral promises that he dangles in front of the electorate at the last minute, then that, added to the much more successful economy that we will generate in a relatively short period of time, will more than finance our very responsible measures of spending proposals, which you will see in our manifesto next week.
Mr. Caruana, thank you. Many thanks for your questions this evening. That is the alternatives tonight, Election 96, the first of our series of programs on GBC television. We'd like to thank Mr. Caruana and also Dr. Garcia and Mr. Bossano for coming in tonight. And also thank you, the audience here at the John Macintosh Hall, for coming in. We'll resume our election coverage on radio lunchtime for the next debate, and also on television at 10:30 on Tuesday night. From us all here, it's a very good evening to you at the